Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Good morning to all. Happy Monday morning on the 10th of March, the year of your Lord, 2014. We are very lucky today. We have with us, joining us in as soon as I shut up, an incredibly gifted scholar and author, former foreign correspondent for the New York Times, and he will be in Pittsburgh on Sunday. I'll tell you more about that later. David Shipler focuses quite a bit on the erosion of civil liberties in this country. Two of his more recent books are Rights at Risk, The Limits of Liberty, and Rights and How Our Search for Safety Invades Our Liberties. Here you go with talk of terrorism in the air again in regard to the Malaysian airliner that has inexplicably disappeared. This is a subject that is always worth paying some attention to, and I think David Shipler would argue that we Americans do not pay enough attention to this. David Shipler, welcome to the program.
Hi, how are you?
I am fine. How are you?
I'm fine.
Good.
We have a bad connection, I have to say. You're very, very faint.
Oh.
Can you crank up the volume at your end at all?
We're going to try. I can also shout. How?
Well,
it's not any better, huh? It's no better?
Not really, but let me change phones, if I may, and see if that helps. Just a second here.
No, I doubt it.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, well, that's... hello?
Hello. Hi.
Hi. All right, that's a little better at my end. I can hear you better, so let's do that.
Okay, I'll do my best, and actually, I'll try not to talk so much so you don't have to not quite hear me. So, I have been reading in advance of this conversation some of your work involving the current state of American civil liberties. And I guess I want to... my question is, I think a lot of people, and you pointed out, that a lot of us who supported Barack Obama have been incredibly maybe shocked or disappointed, at the very least, at how he, in fact, has not pushed back against some of the constraints on civil liberties put in place by the Bush-Cheney administration, and instead has perhaps even made them more stringent. My question is it possible that once you get into that Oval Office and start every one of your days with this, these threat reports and briefings, that something happens to you?
I guess so. I have no insights into that, but I think that it's a reasonable deduction. When you're the president, you do get these scary reports every morning, the threat matrix, I think they call it, and you're responsible for keeping the country safe. And also, as a politician, you know very well that you're not going to be criticized vehemently from the left for impinging on civil liberties as much as you will be from the right for allowing a terrorist attack to occur. So I think both those issues probably weigh pretty heavily on somebody who's in that office.
And I wonder, I don't think we ever imagine that. Is it possible that when you're in that office you know more simply because of the secretive nature of our so-called war on terror?
You know more, of course, because you have access to highly classified intelligence reports. I don't think that can be used as an excuse for damaging the constitutional structure of the country, however. I really think that the president ought to be held to account by ordinary citizens who do not have access to all that information to maintain, the structure of rights that we have in this country, even through the hardest times. I mean, it's always been the case in the U.S. That threats to national security have kind of wooed the country away from the path of constitutional protections. I mean, I count this as the sixth period in American history. Some others might have a different accounting. Beginning with the Alien and Sedition Acts under John Adams during the virtual war with France, and going on through the Civil War, World War I, the Cold War, World War II, the Cold War, and so forth. So we've had quite an experience with leaving the path of protections for our citizens individually for their political views, their ability to associate with unpopular groups, to demonstrate, to protest, and that sort of thing. So we have, a kind of unhappy history of this, and I think we're now in this post-9/11 period at a time where I hope, we will look back on with some shame and regret in the end. But, I fault Obama for not leading us away from this. I mean, it's been almost 13 years since the attacks. It's not that we face no threats. We do face threats. There's no question about it. But I don't think that you can make the argument, really, and I don't think it's been made even by officials very well, that the extensive surveillance really has brought us to a safer place. I mean, if you talk to intelligence people, or former intelligence people for the most part, because they won't talk while they're in office, and I've talked to quite a few of them about this, they'll tell you that the extensive surveillance that's being done by the National Security Agency and so forth has just inundated the intelligence apparatus with too much unfiltered information that they cannot really comprehend and analyze.
So
one guy said to me, at the end of the day, you need a person, you need a human being. All the computer systems in the world are not really going to tell you what to make of this particular piece of intelligence that you have obtained. And we have some cases, we've seen some cases where there's been a failure to connect the dots, primarily because of an overwhelming amount of information that is just too much for the intelligence apparatus to digest. I mean, the most dramatic case was this guy, Abdul Muttalib, I think was his name, whose father went to a U.S. embassy to alert them to the fact that his son had been radicalized, and yet his visa wasn't canceled. He wasn't put through any additional screening when he got on the plane, and he was planning to blow up a plane over Detroit. So, I mean, this is, luckily, the bomb fizzled. And we've been saved, I think, more often by incompetence of the terrorists, or the would-be terrorists, than we have by the extensive surveillance operations. I mean, there have been, if you really drill down into the particular cases of terrorism that have been thwarted, you find a couple of different patterns. One is, the bomb didn't go off. Another is that there was a tipster who actually alerted, or another intelligence agency, a foreign intelligence agency, that may have alerted the U.S. to the fact that so-and-so had been in a training camp, that sort of thing. Or the FBI has conducted sting operations where they will send either an informant who has a criminal record and is trying to buy his way out of a long sentence, or an undercover FBI agent into a mosque or into a Muslim community to pose as a radical and find people who seem susceptible to that kind of persuasion and almost woo them into plotting some terrorist plot that looks pretty dramatic, but whose ingredients the FBI supplies. So, for example, a van full of supposed explosives that's supposed to be detonated near a Christmas tree decorating or lighting ceremony in Portland, Oregon, turns out to be loaded just with phony explosives. The cell phone that the would-be terrorist is handed doesn't connect to anything, and he punches in the number and nothing happens, and so on that basis they arrest him. Well, the guy was planning to do it. I mean, he wanted to do it, but when you look closely at some of these cases, you find that the the threats are coming from people who are kind of hapless wannabes who don't have the skills in bomb making or in even, getting guns,
right,
actually, to to turn this into an actual attack. So you kind of wonder, you sort of have to wonder, well, is the FBI almost manufacturing these situations, or are these real threats that would have, actually been turned into attacks if the FBI hadn't spotted these people in advance? It's really hard to know that. So I think I think that the surveillance has not been very effective, and it has certainly invaded Americans' privacy.
But the fact is we, as you point out, have not been victims in this country of another attack since 9/11, and that in the American people's psyche, and American people generally don't pay a lot of attention to things in terms of the news, and so to them, if there are fewer acts of terror, they assume that everything the government is doing is working just fine, right? That's what the public perception is.
Yeah, I suppose so, and I wouldn't argue that the government is not doing anything right. I mean, I'm sure there are certainly efforts that have been made that have been effective. I think that the issue really is one of balance and common sense in terms of the violation of the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment is a beautifully written amendment, actually, when you read it, and very few Americans have read it or have committed it to memory.
I have it right here. I have it right here, I believe. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized.
Yes, and that grew out of the colonialists' experience of general warrants that the British used to search whole villages for contraband and so forth. So it grew out of a violation, as all the rights that we have actually have grown out of historic violations. And the key word in that Fourth Amendment is the word secure. Did you notice that? The right of the people to be secure. And so when we talk about the zero-sum game between liberty and security, and that we have to give up rights for our security, I think it misremembers the history of this country and how security was seen very, very strongly as security against government intrusion. And I'm not a wild libertarian or anything. I believe in government's role in many areas of our lives, but I do think that the libertarians have a real point on this issue, that and I wish actually more conservatives would champion the idea of small government in the area of respecting the Fourth Amendment. Too few talk about this, and it's a big issue, it seems to me, especially in a digital age where it's so easy to get personal information about people and so easy to misunderstand it and misread it. You can get fragments of communications, cell phone locations and email texts and that sort of thing that you can construct and make a case just about, to fit kind of a theory of a crime or a theory of a plot, which is not necessarily accurate. So I think that, we've given the government very powerful tools, which, to this point I don't think the government has used against political dissidents very much, at least not that I'm aware of, but it could easily happen. We need to remember what was called COINTELPRO in the 50s, 60s, and early 70s. This was a whole program that the FBI had to, of course, long before the digital world that we live in now, that to open mail, to tap phones, to infiltrate organizations they considered to be anti-American. That included anti-war groups, civil rights groups. They monitored Martin Luther King Jr., tried to induce him to commit suicide, Otherwise, they would reveal his extramarital affair and that sort of thing. So it was a very nasty set of activities that involved not just the FBI, but the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and so forth, the IRS, which audited people's tax returns based on their politics. They even had a department or a section that did this. So all that went on under the radar. It was illegal, and it was finally exposed, in various ways. A group of people who just actually came forward and identified themselves after the statute of limitations ran out, had broken into an FBI office in Pennsylvania and sent documents that they stole that recorded some of these activities to a Washington Post reporter. And so it was like, and then the congressional committee headed by Frank Church conducted extensive hearings. They had subpoena power. They did a really interesting and long report, thoroughly documented. And anyone who wants to read this can go online and read it, by the way. You just Google Church Committee, and you'll eventually be taken to the documents. And it's really, if you think that it's okay for the NSA to be collecting all this information, I would urge you to read this report, because what it shows is how nefarious government officials can be when they have all of this power. And I think we have to remember that.
So
at the Constitutional Convention, James Madison said, all men having power ought to be distrusted to a certain degree. The American system is based on a structure of inhibition that prevents individuals in government from exercising excessive power without checks and balances.
So
it doesn't depend on the individuals. We can't count on the goodness of a particular president. Obama may be basically a good guy who doesn't want to see,
right.
The information that's being collected used to smear political dissidents, for example, and that sort of thing. But who can say that will be the case about his successor? So we need to maintain the structure which protects us. And unfortunately, Obama has not done that, and I think he's leaving us with a very damaging legacy as a result.
Well, okay, so what is the difference between us now and us in this in the Frank Church era? I was very much aware and alive then. When when Americans became aware, when the Congress became aware of these overreaches, there was true outrage and there was action taken, and bipartisan. Now, in the wake of Snowden's revelations, there is not the same reaction of sort of universal outrage. So what's different now?
It's very hard for me to do any better than you could do in answering that question. I mean, we are in a different era. There's no question about it. We are much more polarized. We don't have the bipartisan common ground that we used to. We have very, very few members of Congress who are
courageous,
really stand-up people and who operate on principle. They're afraid of being defeated in primaries or elections. There are a few who are courageous, but not many. Dianne Feinstein, the senator from California who heads the Intelligence Committee, has been basically an apologist for the intelligence community. She's really been a huge disappointment. I don't think that Leahy at the Justice Committee, the Judicial Committee, has been very effective at all, even though he has proposed amendments to the Patriot Act and so forth that would have made things better. He hasn't really held the hearings and done the exposés and used the subpoena power of the Senate to get to the bottom of some of these activities. So it's been quite disappointing. I mean, the Snowden revelations have come closer than anything else to animating popular outrage.
But
so there's no question there's been much more pushback on the president about all of this than there was before the Snowden revelations, and I think partly because he hasn't really, he's been fairly judicious about what he's disclosed. He hasn't, I don't think, from what I've seen in the documents, he's disclosed information that's really going to damage American security. He's actually just, the first document that was publicized was an order by the judge, a judge of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, which operates in secret, to command Verizon to turn over all of its metadata to the government. I mean, all of it, all of the phone numbers that everybody called, all the emails that everybody sent, not the texts, but the identifying data. The purpose of which is to, and officials have said this for a long time, they're trying to map relationships. They're trying to create a kind of web of contacts so that if they get some information on one person, they can find out who that person has been in touch with. So they want everything, and it's not a bad idea, in terms of trying to find out what's going on. The bad part of it is that it's indiscriminate. It takes in everyone, including people who are completely innocent and without any suspicion. And, you read the Fourth Amendment. In the Fourth Amendment, there's the word particularly, particularly describing the place and the items to be seized. Well, particularity traditionally has been a key feature of the protections against individual citizens being placed under surveillance for no reason at all, or under broad surveillance. So that a search warrant is supposed to specify, if people go into your home, what it is that they're looking for. The affidavit that's provided to the judge who signs off on the warrant by the affidavit is a sworn statement by a law enforcement officer that there is probable cause, that is more than a 50% chance, that evidence of a particular crime will be found in a particular place. And so it's not, they don't usually issue warrants that permit them to just take everything in the house,
Right.
So, but that's exactly what happens under the NSA. Everything is taken, and the warrants are very fuzzy and vague and not really enforced. So, the limits of the warrants are not really enforced by this secret court. Furthermore, there's no right to see or to know that the searches have been done unless the material is actually introduced into a criminal trial, and often the material that's obtained through NSA or FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court warrants, is just used as a basis for criminal warrants. So it's not, you don't ever see it. You don't even know that it's happened.
Is it?
So anyway, we have a lot of problems about this in this country, I think, and we need to clean it up. And unfortunately, Obama appointed a very good commission of people to look into it. They made some very good recommendations, and Obama hasn't implemented most of them.
That's great.
So he's just been a failure in this regard, I'm afraid.
So one of the thing he promised to do that he hasn't done, that I don't understand why he hasn't, is the closing of Guantanamo.
Well, he's tried. To give him give him the benefit of the argument here, he really did try to close Guantanamo by moving the prisoners that into the criminal court system and trying them there, and the Congress blocked him by cutting off funds and saying that he couldn't use any money to move the prisoners. He was going to try the alleged masterminds of 9/11
in New York,
in federal court in Manhattan, which would have been a good symbolic statement, it seems to me. And a lot of trials of this kind are symbolic, after all. They are fact-finding, naturally, but in these cases, I don't think there would have been much doubt of getting a conviction. And, the tough-minded Republicans who are all macho about national security trembled at the knees about the idea of the 4 or 5 prisoners in shackles being locked up in a very high-security situation in New York. Give me a break.
I know.
Why should you run for the hills? It was really a display of cowardice on the Republican side, which was kind of shocking. So they couldn't do that, and they're now being tried in military commissions at Guantanamo. And the same thing with even with prisoners who have been discovered to not be a threat, the Congress put in rules that prohibited their release to any country that could not certify that it did not have a problem of terrorism. Some of these are Yemenis. Yemen has a problem with terrorism. Therefore, it's legally difficult, if not impossible, for the administration to
send them back.
These people who are not considered threats to Yemen, that sort of thing. So all these, so Obama on that one has really been kind of hogtied, and it's a shame. I think, I'm sure that if he could turn the clock back, he and Eric Holder, the Attorney General, would probably have done things differently, but tried to present the Congress with a fait accompli rather than announce ahead of time what they were going to do. But who knew that the Republicans were going to be so terrified?
Oh, yeah, who? So I wonder, do you wonder, given technology and the fact that, things that seemed impossible 5 years ago are now just, and we cannot, is it conceivable that the Fourth Amendment or this sense of privacy that we have had and treasured simply cannot and will not be able to exist in given the technology that will be available, and how we will sort of readily and nonchalantly sort of give over our information. We don't seem to have this sense of being secure in our private effects anymore.
Well, you're right. I think there's a blurring of the line between the private and the public. We give away information all the time. Kids go on Facebook and they tweet and they do all kinds of stuff about their private lives that I think in my generation we would not have considered appropriate at all. But I think there's a longer history to this erosion of the Fourth Amendment than just the technological age. I did the book I did, Rights at Risk, this is the second book actually about civil liberties, deals mostly with the criminal justice system. And the one judge, a federal judge in Washington, D.C., Paul Friedman, said to me, there's not much of the Fourth Amendment left in criminal law, by which he meant that police now search, and because of the war on drugs, they do a lot of searches on the street and searches of automobiles that really are, the best you can say about them is they really push the envelope in terms of what's permitted under the Fourth Amendment. So this has been a long trend of erosion. And what we need, I think that with the technological element to it, what we need is for the courts to redefine what is the reasonable expectation of privacy. Under the case law, only if you have a reasonable expectation of privacy that is, legitimately acknowledged, is the government's investigation of this information considered a search, quote unquote, under the Fourth Amendment. So you can't. I'm not a lawyer, by the way, I have to say. So I'm repeating what I've been told by lawyers and what I've read in the case law. I may get this a little wrong, but basically, the reasonable expectation of privacy is something that evolves and changes depending on the era. Now, back in the 20s, when long-distance telephone service was first inaugurated, or some years after, but when it was first beginning to be used more extensively, there was a Supreme Court case in which the court decided that no warrant was required to listen to telephone calls because the signals went outside the home.
Uh-huh.
They were in the wires,
Sure.
in the street. So therefore, they weren't covered by the Fourth Amendment. Well, that seems pretty absurd today, and the court then reversed itself, but not till the 60s. It took decades for the court to actually come back to understanding that warrants really were needed to listen to phone conversations. And I think we're in the same kind of situation. I hope we're in the same kind of situation now, where eventually the courts will see that people should have a reasonable expectation of privacy over much of the digital information that they convey. I mean, as it stands, if you give information to a third party, you no longer have an expectation of privacy. So if you write a check, you send it to the phone company or your electrician, that check is no longer in your possession.
Right.
Therefore, no search warrant is necessarily to obtain it. I mean, there are certain situations in which it would be. But basically, for example, a computer situation, if you're, using a computer solely internally without connecting to the internet, then for the government to get the hard drive, it needs a search warrant. But if you've conveyed information from your home computer, the same information, out into the internet in some way, a regular warrant is not necessarily required. And the one thing that's happened in the last couple of years that gives me a little bit of hope that this might be turning around, this idea of what constitutes reasonable expectation of privacy, is a case the Supreme Court ruled on in which the court unanimously found that police departments would have to get warrants to attach a GPS tracking device surreptitiously to a vehicle. And they accepted there were many different opinions in this unanimous opinion, but so there were different, different reasoning. But one group of justices accepted the argument that was made by the panel in the lower court, the D.C. Circuit, that tracking a vehicle with a GPS device 24/7 is different, qualitatively different, from a police officer following somebody on the street. I mean, the government's argument, and by the way, the Obama administration argued that you shouldn't have to have a warrant. That's the side that he was on. That argument was, look, people are out on a public street. There's no expectation of privacy on the public street. That's fair enough. So police officers don't have to have a warrant to get in a car and follow you around. But the GPS device is different, according to the court, because it collects every single location 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In this case, I think for about a month, they were tracking a suspected drug dealer, which means that you know what church the person goes to, whether he's got a medical condition because of a doctor's visit, whether he's having an affair, depending on where he goes, and who he's associating with, who he's having, lunch with, or who he's, where he is, at least, the location where he's having lunch, and all that kind of information, which is much more extensive than what an individual police officer or even a team of officers is likely to come up with. And so, and I believe it was Sotomayor who wrote in a concurring opinion in that case, I think it was she who opened the question of redefining the expectation of privacy in this digital age. So one can hope that the courts, which are always behind the times technologically, will catch up with this, and they will begin to see that government observations of your life using these means should be under the Fourth Amendment. I mean, there have been lots of cases about cell phone location tracking in the lower courts, and this is an area where probably the courts could weigh in a beneficial way.
Well, this is such a huge subject. I look forward to hearing your speech on Sunday, and I do want to let my audience know that you are all invited to hear David Shipler at Carnegie Mellon University, Posner Hall at 7 o'clock this coming Sunday. He is keynoting the annual meeting of the Pittsburgh chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. And I, for one, look forward to being there. If there was ever a time when being a card-carrying member of the ACLU is an important thing to be, it is certainly now. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thank you for having me on, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
Yes, I too. Thank you. David K. Shipler, and I really do, first of all, let me alert you to his blog. This is, as you can tell, one smart, thoughtful gentleman. And now why am I blanking on it? It is shiplerreport.blogspot.com. And you can go on there. It's all there, all the posts. You can look at what subjects you're interested in. This guy is brilliant. He's just flat out brilliant. Well, I am so far behind here. Let me get a break in and we'll be right back.
Stick around for more with Lynn Cullen Live after this.
Public Theater's masterpiece season unleashes a true classic with An Iliad. Homer's tales of the Trojan War take center stage in this dynamic tour de force featuring one actor playing all of the Greek epic's most famous characters. Tegal Bougere stars in this emotionally charged theater event that the San Francisco Chronicle hailed as absolutely riveting. An Iliad is on stage at the O'Reilly from March 6th through April 6th. For tickets, call 412-316-1600 or buy online at ppt.org.
BergBargains.com is the best bet for great deals in the Berg. Log on today for exclusive bargains from your favorite local restaurants like Blue Line Grill, Atria's, and Verde. Plus discounts on gift cards from H&M, Nordstrom's, and the Cheesecake Factory. BergBargains.com, Pittsburgh's best bargains. BergBargains.com.
Packers.
Vikings. We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown. We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full. But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live United.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Pittsburgh Public Theater's masterpiece season unleashes a true classic with An Iliad. Homer's tales of the Trojan War take center stage in this dynamic tour de force featuring one actor playing all of the Greek epic's most famous characters. Tegal Bougere stars in this emotionally charged theater event that the San Francisco Chronicle hailed as absolutely riveting. An Iliad is on stage at the O'Reilly from March 6th through April 6th. For tickets, call 412-316-1600 or buy online at ppt.org.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn at pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
You know, David Shipler didn't say it, but when I said, so what's different when I asked, what's different now, in the Church Report would have been, the late 70s or early 80s? And so after Americans and their representatives in Washington became fully aware of what I can never say that word. What was that? All the crap that was going on, the infiltration and the harassment of perfectly legal organizations that just were not in line with the administration's point of view. And when the extent of this overreach, governmental overreach, was uncovered, there was outrage on both sides of the aisle. I mean, to an extent, you saw that after all these NSA documents came out because of Snowden's release. But there it ended, essentially. Nothing changed. And I said, so what's different now? Because historically, if you look at the overreach, he went all the way back to the Alien and Sedition Act under President Adams. There was always a pullback. Americans always regained their senses and got their fear under control and pulled things back. We don't seem inclined to do that now. And when I asked him what's different, the first thing he said is, we are so divided. We are so polarized. And that is what the difference is. And the more, I mean, I am sorry. I know I sound like Johnny One Note here, but I really think the irrevocable harm that has been done to this country by this polarization, which has subverted so many of our governmental institutions, but also our faith in those institutions. And I really think it can be laid at the feet of some political operatives who saw it was in their interests to create mistrust and fear, and then to capitalize politically from it. And so, I think that when American history gets written up, and this is all, we are living in the past, we're all long gone, and people look back at what happened. Why did the country not respond as it always had in the past to these violations? Why did it not? Why was it so paralyzed? Why was it so polarized? I really think it comes down to Roger Ailes. And I think he and his cohorts will go down in American history as some of the most destructive people in our history. Destructive of, as I said, our most cherished institutions, and destructive of our very sense of national purpose or community. They have cynically attempted successfully. You know, I've noticed that there's a number of books being written now by people about their outrage and their sorrow in what they describe as the hijacking of their fathers' lives and minds and sense of peace and trust. And these are, I've seen more than one of these. These are pieces being written by people who used to have fathers who were happy-go-lucky guys, engaged, and who are now in their 70s and 80s, and they have been absconded with by Fox News, that they do nothing but listen to Fox News. They swallow it whole. You see the letters they write to the editor, this mass sort of brainwashing. I don't think I'm overstating the case when I lay this at the feet of Roger Ailes and all the other cynics on the conservative side that sought to divide Americans for their own gain. And for the corporate interests, the media owners who gave AM radio over to that one fear-mongering, rage-inducing, cynicism-inducing point of view, and who shut out all other points of view. So that for the last 20 years, it is quite possible to get in a car and drive from coast to coast or from north to south, and just allowing yourself to listen to AM radio, or even I'll throw in FM, AM and FM. The odds of you finding for your ear and your edification anything but this steady drumbeat of fear and rage I don't know. I hope somebody figures it out and can write the damning book that will long into the future, because it ain't going to happen now because we're too divided. When we can look back and see it, see the forest for the trees, we will see that that was how things began to come apart. All right. I really do hope that you'll make a point of maybe coming out to CMU 7 on Sunday, Posner Hall, to go to this ACLU annual meeting. And I do mean it. Never in our history has it been more important to join the organization that more than any other battles against this kind of incursion, and battles often successfully, and does it not for power, and does it not for financial gain. It does it purely on principle, trying to safeguard the freedoms that we supposedly cherish, but which we clearly are, and even I am not only a member, I sit on the board, the state board of the ACLU. And because of that, my understanding of the work that they do has grown and grown, and we all owe them a great debt. I think the least we all can do is become a member. You don't even have to go to meetings. Just sign up and stand up to support, to push back at this constant incursion, and often successful now incursion into our civil liberties. David Shipler, I saw on his blog, he wrote one little item where he said the 13 lessons of 2013, I find some of them very, very interesting. He says Syria and Libya showed us that the initial result of revolution is not freedom or democracy. The initial result of revolution is anarchy. And in regard to Obama and whether we, by the election of an African American, Americans have entered some kind of post-racial period, which is obviously ridiculous, he says this: racism is animated, not eliminated, by electing a black president. That's what we found out. There is more racism apparent. His election animated racism, far from eliminating it. And we ran out of time, but I really wanted to ask him about his 13th lesson of 2013, which is this: the future is imprisoned by the present. And I myself can, let my head go all over the place with that beginning. All you have to do is look at our Congress. And how we can't move forward, how we can't, because we are literally imprisoned by this. I think Roger Ailes should be hung from the nearest lamppost. I really do. I've watched the damage, as have you. I've lived the damage by virtue of being a talk radio host who used to be on AM radio. I watched as the stations I worked for disappeared from under my feet. Until there were none. except the ones that did the bidding of the right wing. Really something. Okay. So this air crash is sort of a really creepy thing. The fact that, I mean, we're used to people at least having some sense of what happened, right? It's also unsettling when you're reading about these things and you're reading about them on an airplane, which is what I was doing. It's always, I hate that when you're ending up on an airplane when, there's been some horrific airplane crash. But having spent the weekend twice, in the essential custody of the TSA, you do have to wonder at these security arrangements we have made and that we acquiesce to and that are supposed to give us some sense of security. And you can, if you travel much at all, you see how random it all is and how, 1 minute you can walk through with nobody giving you any crap, and you've got maybe some stuff, some liquid in your suitcase. They didn't notice it. They didn't give a shit if they did. Whatever. You can see how easy it is still to circumvent this stuff. The security. I don't know. Hey, I have a question. St. Patrick's Day, isn't that this 17th? Isn't that when it usually?
Next Monday. But
it's next Monday.
Celebrated.
So, okay, so here's my question. It's next Monday, right? So, I'm in Philly on Saturday night, and some of us were walking over to our hotel, and there was a bar that was, people had spilled out onto the street. They're all in green. They got all their green. And I had such a, what? I thought, what's gone on that now St. Patrick's Day gets...
St. Practice Day.
Oh, for God's sake.
In which you drink.
Wait a minute. Do it again.
That's all it is.
What, St. Practice Day?
Mm-hmm.
And that's a week before?
Usually. It is here, at least.
What do you mean here? In Pittsburgh? Mm-hmm. So this is a thing in Pittsburgh? St. Practice Day?
Yeah.
Where you...
Get your drink up.
You practice getting drunk. Yeah. As if that needs
tolerance.
Practice. Huh?
Build up your tolerance.
Build up your tolerance. So you can get really drunk a week hence.
Yes.
Why do I think this is not a good idea?
No, it's not. It's ridiculous.
Good God in heaven. As if St. Patrick's Day wasn't enough. St. Practice Day. Oh, man. Jeez. So anyway, that sort of explains things because this is new to me. This is new to me. I thought I was in some kind of a strange, I knew daylight savings time was going to start that night, but I thought, I know I'm going to spring an hour ahead, but am I springing a week ahead here? I was so mixed up. So apparently St. Practice's revelries on university campuses over the weekend resulted in all kinds of arrests and alcohol-induced stupors and... The headline here is about how IUP apparently for the second year in a row. So this is just a new kind of a tradition. Some folks trying to make it a tradition, and they're doing it. So well done, way to go, just what the world needs. You think that's something that the bar owners are behind, the beer companies are are pushing in some nefarious manner. Honest to Pete. And I see that Jordan Miles is about to seek justice again. There's jury selection starts on his all new, and I just want to say, here's what I'm going to do. I don't know about you. I'm not even going to I refuse to get sucked into it again because I know the outcome. Do we not know the outcome? Who has told us over and over again? Is it Potter who keeps saying, you can't convict a cop? And even though the aggrieved Jordan Miles has some new high-powered attorneys, new judge, new pretty much everything, there's not going to... The poor... part of me says, why does somebody keep putting him through this? I don't think he's going to get justice, and I don't want to be on that emotional roller coaster again, and I'm sorry. I'm opting out. I will, of course, read the articles of what has happened and what is going on, but I better... Ooh, geez, how did it get that late? Do I have a break?
You have to take another break.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. I have to take a break.
Comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
Public Theater's masterpiece season unleashes a true classic with an Iliad. Homer's tales of the Trojan War take center stage in this dynamic tour de force featuring one actor playing all of the Greek epic's most famous characters. Tego Bougere stars in this emotionally charged theater event that the San Francisco Chronicle hailed as absolutely riveting. An Iliad is on stage at the O'Reilly from March 6th through April 6th. For tickets, call 412-316-1600 or buy online at ppt.org.
Download the brand new CP Haps app and find out what's going on in Pittsburgh. It's the fun and free app that puts the most popular events at your fingertips. Text events to 77948 to download now and register to win tickets to see Pittsburgh versus St. Louis at PNC Park April 4th. Plus, lots of great free stuff every week. The CP Haps app brought to you by Pittsburgh City Paper.
Hi, I'm LeVar Burton, and I'm proud to be a book person. How do I choose a book? Sometimes it's the cover, sometimes it's the title. I guess I'm pretty visual. If a book's really impressing me and the writing is really good, I will peek and see what the last paragraph is, because the endings of books should rock you. I am a book person, and if you're a book person too, read to a child and spark a lifetime of ambition. Join me at bookpeopleunite.org because reading is fundamental. A public service announcement brought to you by Reading is Fundamental, Library of Congress, and the Ad Council.
Public Theater's masterpiece season unleashes a true classic with an Iliad. Homer's tales of the Trojan War take center stage in this dynamic tour de force featuring one actor playing all of the Greek epic's most famous characters. Tego Bougere stars in this emotionally charged theater event that the San Francisco Chronicle hailed as absolutely riveting. An Iliad is on stage at the O'Reilly from March 6th through April 6th. For tickets, call 412-316-1600 or buy online at ppt.org.
Now, it's back to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com.
All right, yeah, we're back, but not for long. Henry writes, Lynn, certainly the missing plane has captured our attention this weekend, and because of that, some other newsworthy stories have been lost in the coverage. One of those is that Rand Paul won the straw poll at CPAC. Did they learn nothing in 2012, says Henry. Henry, we're talking about CPAC. You thought they would learn something? They always double down there. And Rand Paul, I almost brought him up in the interview with David Shipler because it is true that one of Rand Paul's chief, one of the things he's most intense about is this NSA surveillance and general incursions into our civil liberties. And there's this strange coalescence of people on the left who are concerned about those things, and on the libertarian right where we come together. And I had wanted to ask him, but it was clearly there was no way, we didn't have the time, if there could be some kind of strange new party, or not, if not party, coalition of some sorts that would become less amorphous and more formed. Yeah, Rand Paul ain't going to win nationally, but he's somebody that, yeah, you got to keep your eye on. Who were they going to give it to? Who was going to win that? I mean, what's his name? You believe I've already forgotten the name of the New Jersey Governor, Christie? It's CPAC. That, you know who they really wanted? Sarah Palin. So, yeah, have they learned? Can I answer your rhetorical question? Did they learn nothing? No. Or, I mean, did they learn nothing? Then the answer is yes, they learned nothing, I believe. So, all right, we're done. Oh, we didn't change our clock.
Oh,
We're going to have to get a crane or a cherry picker or Carlo.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys. Talk at you tomorrow.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.